This lesson is fractions, decimals, and percents, and we'll do all this without a calculator. Remember, anything written in blue I'd like you to write on your activity sheet as well. We'll remember that percent means out of 100, and sometimes it will help if we think of that as over 100. And really another way of saying the same thing is divided by 100. So depending on what we are trying to do or what we're given, we'll think of percent in these three ways that are really three different ways of saying the same thing. We'll start off by changing percents to a decimal, and in that situation we'll think of percent as meaning divided by 100. And the quick way to divide by 100 is to move the decimal 2 spots to the left. A couple ways to remember that. First of all, our number needs to get smaller if we're dividing by 100. And think of your place value chart. A hundredth is 2 spots. So for 35%, to get rid of that percent sign, we'll take the decimal. Since we don't see the decimal, it's after the 5. 1, 2 to the left. And we usually put the 0 in front as well. Now be careful. Sometimes people think, oh, just put the decimal point in front of the number. Not necessarily. We have to move it 2 left. Right now the decimal's after the 7. 1, 2, and we'll put the 0 in front. Now remember, in a previous video you looked at this and you read that as 7/100ths, so that fits in with our idea of 7% being 7 out of 100. Be careful here as well. Sometimes people say, well, that's already a decimal. Not really, it's still a percent. I'm going to write down the 3 and the 2 without the decimal point, because that decimal point is going to move 1, 2, so 32 thousandths. 140%, I'm going to copy down the digits without the decimal. 1, 2. A lot of times in a multiple choice situation, you wouldn't see the correct answer listed like that, because that 0 at the very end of a decimal doesn't mean anything, so you'd probably see it as 1 4/10. But I wanted to have that in there for the idea of moving the decimal 2 to the left. Now this time the decimal is in front of the 5. We have to move it 2, and we'll put the leading 0 in front. 26%, 2 to the left, 26/100ths. Change the decimal to a percent. Now it's the reverse. Move, I should put the word move in there, the decimal to the right. So the decimal point was in front of the 5, 1, 2, 58%. And again, 58/100ths, 58 out of 100. Need to move it 2 to the right. That will become 30%. Be careful here. Sometimes people in a situation like this just want to stick a percent sign on there. You still need to move the decimal 2 to the right. 2 is 200%. 7 thousandths, move it 2 to the right. 7/10ths of a percent. 1 4/10ths, move it 2 to the right. 140%. Peek back at number 4 on your paper. That was the reverse of this. And 385 10,000ths, move it 2 to the right. It'll be between the 3 and the 8, 3.85%. Now, change to a fraction in simplest form. Another way to think about percent is over 100. So we'll take this percent sign and get rid of it by putting 45 over 100. We were asked for simplest form, so we need to remember that numbers that end in 5 and 0 can be divided by 5. 100 divided by 5 is 20. 8%, 8 over 100. Now we can take this in 2 steps or 1 step. I'll take 2 steps. They're both even, cut them both in half. They're both even. even, cut them in half again. And if you remember that 4 goes into both 8 and 100 and go right to that step, that's fine. Be careful here, percent means over 100. There's a tendency for people to want to put this one over 1,000, but it's over 100. And if we think about this, a percent that's over 100%, it's going to be 1 and something. And there are several ways or orders in which you could simplify this. 100 goes into 125 once with 25 left over. And 25 100ths simplifies to 1 1/4. What some people like to do is divide both of these by 25 first and get 5 over 4 and then simplify to 1 1/4. This one's a little bit tricky because we have to put 0.5 over 100. It can be a little tricky to simplify this. What we'll do first is multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 10. What that will do is multiplying by 10 moves the decimal 1 to the right, so 5/10 becomes 5, and 100 becomes 1,000. And then I can simplify that. 5 goes into 5 once, 5 goes into 1,000 200 times. And if I think through that a little bit, 1 over 100 would be 1%. 1 over 200 would be half of that, which is half a percent. 27%, 27 over 100, cannot be simplified. 12%, 12 over 100. Now they're both even. You could sure cut them both in half for 6 over 50, but 4 does go into both. 3 times into 12, 25 times into 100. Now we'll be changing fractions into percents. The first one, well, 29 over 100, that is 29%. For 3/5, what we'll try to do is get the denominator to be 100. So think back to what we did with proportions. From 5 to 100 is times 20. 3 times 20 is 60. So 3 out of 5 is equivalent to 60 out of 100 for 60%. We'll try that again for the next one. If we can get it out of 100, that will be the percent. That will be times 5. 13 times 5 is 65, and if you need to do a little work here on the side, that's fine, for 65%. Now, 7/8. We could try that, what we did before. The problem is 8 does not go into 100 evenly. So one of the things that always works, really the ones I just showed you were shortcuts. It will always work to change the fraction to a decimal. And I'll just put a few zeros here and see how this works out. And then do what we did earlier in changing that decimal to a percent. So let's see, 8 into 70 is 8 for 64. 70 minus 64 is 6, and I'll bring down a 0. 8 times 7 is 56. Subtract 8 into 40 is 5 for 40. And that worked out perfectly. Now, be careful, this isn't our final answer here. However, getting from a decimal to a percent is pretty quick, moving it 2 to the right. Quick reality check. If I got 7 out of 8 right on a quiz, that's pretty good. That's quite good, 87.5%. Now, we could divide this out, but many of you will see right away that that's going to be 90% because I multiplied by both by 10. 1 1/5. I'm quite sure that this will be over 100%. Let's get that 5 to be something out of 100. Multiply by 20, multiply by 20. 120 Another option would have been to change this to an improper fraction and divide. 2/3. Well, 3 doesn't go into 100 evenly, so I'll do the same thing I did with 7/8. And make sure to bring that decimal up. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 6 is 18. And it looks like we have a repeating decimal here. Be careful, we're going for a percent here, so we still need to move the decimal 2 to the right. 66.6 repeating percent. Now in a multiple choice situation, it's possible if this were the problem and you had 4 choices, maybe they rounded up to 66.7%, or maybe they rounded all the way up to 67%. So in multiple choice, you have to keep in mind they might have done some rounding. A couple challenge problems to finish up here. 13 1/5% to a decimal. Well, I know that 1/5 equals 2/10. So that's the same as 13.2%. But don't stop there, we want a decimal. Move the decimal 2 to the left. 25 5/6% to a fraction in simplest form. Well, I could put that over 100, but that would be kind of tricky to simplify. So this time I'm going to interpret percent as divided by 100. And I know I need to change these both to fractions. Let's see, 6 times 25. I'll take a quick side trip here. And I guess I could have thought about counting quarters. 6 quarters is $1.50. Now don't forget to add the 5 here. And remember, dividing fractions, we multiply by the reciprocal. Then multiply straight across. You might have been doing some cross multiplying lately, so be careful. Multiply straight across when it's multiplication. Cross multiplying is if you have an equal sign in between. I know 5 goes into both of these, so I'll take another quick side trip for 5 into 155. 3 for 15, once for 5. Let's see if I can do this in my head. 5 into 600. 5 into 60 is 12, so 5 into 600 is 120. That is in simplest form. Quick reality check. This is close to 25%. Now I know it's closer to 26%, but for estimating with percents, we like 25s. So that's close to 25%. 25% is about a fourth. 31 is close to 30. 30 over 120 is a fourth. So this is a little over 25%, which fits with what I have here.